Hi there. I'm going to share about the pressures that architects face. It's something that I think an architectural student commented on a video before, so I thought might as well share it. I'll try and use a framework of looking at external and internal pressures, as in within the profession, and also look at it in terms of time, cost, and quality as a framework. And this video will be for, I hope it reaches architects or people who are studying architecture so that they get a glimpse of what it's like and the real pressures that people may talk about or may not. I hope that it's also interesting to people who are architects, because it's great to share our experiences because it could be quite isolating when you're working in a profession and you're under the pressures, the same pressures as your peers, and people in my generation generally don't share much. I hope this is also useful for people who are not architects, so that they can, when they see a building that is designed, that they see what may go behind it in terms of the people and the work and resources and the expertise required to do it. I'm just starting this little video from Sydney Uni at Law, and this actually is a competition that I worked on in 2003. I remember it distinctly because it was a very frantic competition. I was working quite long hours to get the competition done, and it was an international competition. I think there was Foster, 3XN, and a few other notable architects, and somehow we won. I remember it was in the last few days, and we weren't happy with the imaging and the visualization of the competition, and we totally scrapped, I think it was Electric Image or maybe Cinema 4D images, and went back to ArchiCAD and Photoshop. And it was very last second change, but the design was awesome, and it was probably the smallest Balkan scale entry of the 6 entries. There was a lot of teaching space which was below grade, and so that the tower structure was quite slender and had good design responses. But anyway, back to today's topic. In terms of the external pressures, there's definitely pressure in the building industry. Design in a way that fulfills the development objectives. Usually it means yield, it means build cost, and at the same time, we need to do good design that achieves approval, that works in the local scale and context, that is articulated in a way that aesthetically pleasing and in working with the neighborhood. There's pressure to do something that is a great addition to the urban environment. But at the same time, to make a project feasible, it needs to be efficient in terms of the area to core area, basically the efficiency. Efficient in terms of the facade area to floor area, which is basically how much the building goes in and out. It's got to be efficient in terms of achieving the area or the room numbers or the regularly shaped spaces, so that the developer can sell space, whether it's an apartment or a commercial space or otherwise. Of course, it's not just cost pressure, there's also time pressure. Most developers, they have deadlines. Projects are large, they have a lot of borrowings behind it, and even to hold the land, there's a lot of interest. Because of that holding cost, we have to work usually very fast. We have to achieve all the design and documentation in a very tight time frame. And as anyone in the field knows, if there's only 3 main factors that you can work in a triangle, there's the time, there's the cost, and there's the quality. So whenever we have a lot of pressure on the time and the quality, it affects, the time and the cost, it affects the quality. When we talk about pressure that architects face, pressure can be a good and a bad thing. So it can be bad if there is time and cost pressure that affects quality. It can be bad and I'll talk about the effects of pressures in terms of the consequences for people within the profession and the effect on architecture or the quality of architecture. But it can also be a good thing. Pressure can drive efficiency, pressure can drive innovation, and it can drive positive urban outcomes. Another pressure, external pressure, is increase in regulation. There's different types of regulation that architects face. They can be on everything. There's a lot of Australian standards that architects need to be aware of and design buildings that comply with. And that can be good that's necessary for safety, so everyone can enjoy using safely. An example of that would be like the gradients of a ramp and the railings to make sure that people don't fall off or slip off a tile, or that the materials are safe to use and don't burn the building down. Another form of compliance is thermal and sustainability. So for example, buildings today, we need to perform much better in terms of thermal and solar performance. Need to keep if it's summer, keep the hot energy outside. If it's winter, retain it. If it's active systems like air conditioning, need to make it efficient. Generally need to have some sort of shading and insulation. There's a lot of responsibility with designing a building because the actions and decisions that you make, they get put into a building for a long time. People might be using these buildings for decades. So it's something that you can walk by decades later, like I just did with the Sydney Uni. And people are using it, people are adapting it, and architecture is quite a long game. There's also pressure to adapt in terms of technology and AI, and something that architects, I guess in my field or in my era, are a bit slow to adapt. Even the software that we use, there's not been much movement on the software development for quite some time. The main ones are AutoCAD and ArchiCAD. But there's been some movement lately with some new generation software. One thing about being an architect is that you're always having to learn new things and new software, new ways of doing things, new ways to design and document. And when you're given the time constraint, if you don't know these new software, you can be a lot slower to achieve the design and documentation than others. I see increasing pressure to design for modularity and prefab. That can be a good thing because the building costs have gone up quite a lot. A lot of projects don't stack up. Labor cost has gone up. And so there's been a real desire and pressure to design for modularity so that buildings can include more off-site construction in a controlled environment, like in a factory. And it's growing, it's quite big overseas, and it will continue to grow in Australia. I'm in touch with a few people because I'm interested in the subject for one of our website's prefab projects. There are also pressures within the industry. No one ever gives us a job easily or for free. A lot of projects start out as design competitions, and we need to compete with other architectural firms, putting our best bid, our best design for the site. The client will consider buildable. And that requires a lot of effort. I've actually done another video about architectural competitions and that process. You can see it probably this way. I'll link up there. The architectural competitions can drive innovation, and that can be great. But quite often with the time and cost constraint, you're not given a lot of time to design, and so you have to have really good systems to be able to achieve the design or come up with the concept and implement it into a scheme. In terms of the implication of some of these pressures, in terms of time and cost, what I found, and I assume it's been like this for many generations, architects don't get paid a lot compared to other professions, and we're not given much time to do the work that we need to do. So to achieve quality, you have to go to the extra distance, because quite often, say for example, we're given a month to achieve, to move from one stage to another, say from design development to documentation. But that phase historically would have taken quite a few months, whereas now it might get compressed. And so you have to draw all the details for how all the different facade junctions work. You have to put in all the services requirements, like the lighting, mechanical, and acoustic, and so on. And there's very little time to coordinate. And what happens is that you put it all there in a package that can go to, in documentation, go for pricing, and then you have a good team to sort that out at that stage. And then when it goes to the next stage, which is construction, where the teams shrink quite a lot, and the majority of the team go to the next project, and then the smaller remnant team carry forward the project to construction. They have to deal with and coordinate all this information into a resolve scheme that can be built. With all of these external constraints, there's definitely downward pressure on salaries, and that downward pressure can mean that, combined with a cost of living crisis, it can be quite hard to afford living in an expensive city. And that's a good and a bad thing, mostly bad, but sometimes good. Some of our baseline skills are that we know how to design, and we're resourceful. And so given this kind of financial constraint, if you're able to, I've had to find a place to live or a small property, be able to renovate it and add value to it, and then shuffle along, move on to the next property, do the same thing. And if you repeat it enough times, eventually you might find a place that suits your family requirements. Whereas if I didn't have the architectural skill, I probably couldn't do it, but then I'll probably get paid more. So I'm given these skills, might as well use it. If you like the more certain way of achieving housing, which is that you get a place and you don't move much, then it will be very harder to get into the housing ladder at a higher price point. It just doesn't work out for architects. When I talk about pressures that affect architects that people don't really talk about, and that is the pressure on families. So if you're raising a family as an architect or a young family, because of the time pressure, you're always feeling like, well, there can be a pressure for overtime hours. I've had to do a lot of those in the past, particularly to achieve a documentation package. It's very intense. You got to get hundreds, if not thousands of documents or drawings, along with specifications, together so that the building can be priced appropriately. And if you miss something, then it comes back to bite in a bad way. So there's a project can really take up a lot of your mental space. And so you can, even when you're with your family, it can really draw your attention away, which can be really bad because you can alienate you from your partner or your wife or your family members and your kids, and they can really feel quite negative towards the architectural industry. So and you get the same, you see that a lot of dads around, even when they go to sporting events or kids' activities, that they're always on their phone, or at the park, they're always looking at their phone. Maybe they're checking an email that they think is important to answer, but that can all add up to resentment between the parents and the kids. And it's a real challenge that I've tried to fight against, and so that when I am with my kids, that I am actively talking to them and seeing what they're up to, and being an active parent to them. And just up to UTS Central, which I did another video about. Might have it as a link on the top right hand side. With the pressures on families, it can also affect you mentally, because you can be quite weighed down with a project. And in the design and building industry, people can be quite aggressive because there's a lot at stake with the big budgets behind these projects. Architects can be seen as the obstacle because we're fighting for quality, so we're an obstacle for people who are trying to achieve a project under cost constraint and time constraint. And so in the ideal world, everyone is working together to achieve their outcomes collectively, but it can be quite antagonistic in the industry, and that can really affect people and architects mentally. So it's important to take care as an architect, to, if you're feeling isolated, to talk to your peers, to share your experiences, because I fully understand how it can really affect people, and people generally burn out and then they quit architecture, go to another career like project management, where they can put the thumb on architects, or into something that is more laid back. But I went into this industry knowing all these pressures. I really enjoy working on the design of buildings, and so I'm trying to manage these pressures while I'm trying to develop this career. Hopefully this video can be helpful to others who are considering architecture. I won't say that the pressures are only a bad thing. They're good in that it's forced me to develop my skills and hopefully attributes which are useful for architecture and beyond. And I'll share. But yeah, my hope is that people who go in with their eyes open and know that, and be well prepared, so that there aren't the typical person so engrossed in their career that they neglect their wife, have a divorce, and alienate their kids. So I hope you don't be like that, and that you're well prepared and are also able to achieve great architecture. So that's it for this video.